We have no choir today. The 49th session of the Senate, the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. Today will be led in prayer by a distinguished colleague from the city of Valenzuela and the Republic of the Philippines, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's bow our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the gift of another day that you have given us. We worship and adore you. O Lord, O Lord, for your kindness and mercy as we come together in this season. We pray that you will guide us with your wisdom and grace to make the right choices for the welfare of our nation. Bilang mga mambabatas, gawin mo kaming instrumento sa pagtugon sa mga nangangailangan ng aming mga kababayan. Ipagkaloob mo sa amin ang tibay at lakas sa kabila ng mga hamon na kinakaharap ng bansa, tulad ng sakunang sumusubok sa katatagan ng mga kababayan naming apektado ng baha, pagbaha at landslide. Dalangin din namin na mas magamit namin ang aming konstitusyon bilang makapangyarihang gabay tungo sa kaayusan at kaunlaran ng aming pinakamamahal na bayan. Higit sa lahat, mas lalo mong pagtibayin ang totoong saysay ng demokrasya sa aming lipunan, ang pakikinig sa tunay na boses ng taong bayan at hindi ang pagsusulong ng gawa-gawang panawagan. As public servants, let unity be the cornerstone of our service, enabling us to realize our collective goals for the advancement of our nation. Lead us away from any form of temptation, especially from the influence of those who prioritize personal interest in the name of power. In today's session, direct our goals to align with your sacred will. Keep righteousness at the forefront of our minds, and let it be the guiding light as we fulfill our duties and purposes. We honor you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Bayang magiliw, pelas ng sinanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisihil. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong magaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagilingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Today, we have some guests to render some songs. It's the Manlilikha ng Bayan, Adelita Bagcal, Ilocano Master of Oral Traditions. She will perform an Ilocano chant entitled Ya Adani Iti Tayeng Ti Kinaimbag. I hope it was right. I said it right. You have to ask Amy.
Ay dalot dumidinalang ata dalot tay dumidinalang. Ay dalot dumidinalang ata dalot tay dalidalang. O amami nga nay langitan puon ti imbag namuangayan. Ket apo Adto'y dagiti anak mo nga umay ita kakabsat o ama agkararag. Ta sapay ta itdem kadkadakwada dagiti agpampanday ayat linteg ikam kad ida itay kirenda pig sa nagpanunot may panggap ti pagilyan may panggap iti pagilyan nga pa kay ramanan si bubukal nga ina nga Pilipinas ay dalot dumidi na lang ikan nakam apot kirad mi anarway ket apo dagiti aya senadores nga adda itatan ulitek apo nga gabayam ida gabayam panangi pa tagikwada kastamet apo ngay para borda ti si bubukel Pilipinas ket kunak nga roden itata amen amen naimbag nga malem tayamin.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Adelita Bagcal. Mabuhay po kayo. Session suspended for 1 minute.
Okay lang.
Secretary, please call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Ligarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 23 members present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Before we proceed, Mr. President, again, we thank and welcome manlilikha ng bayan, Manang Adelita Bagcal, an Ilocano Master of Oral Traditions. Before we continue, Mr. President, the Senate President Pro Temp, Senator Lauren Legarda, is seeking the floor. I move that she be recognized, Mr. President.
Our
Yes.
distinguished Senate President Pro Tempore, Senator Lauren Legarda, is recognized. Madam.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to make of record that Manlilikha ng Bayan awardee Adelita Bagcal was awarded for Ilocano oral traditions, and she is from Bana, Ilocos Norte. She was among the 9 who were declared through proclamation number 427 last December 15, 2023. She has been championing the performance of the waning Ilocano oral tradition called Dalot and other oral traditions since she was age 15. So what is Dalot? It is an oral tradition of Ilocos Norte, which I'm sure Senator Marcos knows about, that is centered on courtship and weddings, performed on pamamanhikan, on marriage agreements, on the giving of dowry, and during the wedding itself. So the context is the agreement between families of the bride and the groom are to be sung in a joust between the two manangs who sing this extemporaneously as she did during the full length of the social practice, which may last for more than an hour, performed on several occasions. So this is just a part of that song which she sang extemporaneously. So she is also the only remaining master of the art at age 78. I know that you asked her how old is she, and she's 78. She's the only master of the art that requires command of the Ilocano language and the figures of speech to recite this majestic piece. I wanted to put that on record.
Yes, we thank the good Senate President Pro Tempore for arranging today's presentation by our distinguished guest.
Mr. President, may I
Yes,
continue acknowledging our guests from the gallery? We have with us, Mr. President, guests of Senator Estrada, Miss Anita Rose Gomez of Zambales, and Miss Natasha Jung of Kananga. Both are participating in the upcoming Miss Universe Philippines 2024. We welcome both of them in this August chamber, Mr. President.
Yes, welcome to your Senate.
Mr. President, we'd also like to acknowledge the guests of this representation. We have with us here, Mr. President, my good friend and very close friend of mine, like a brother to me, Mr. Jonathan Orania from Los Angeles, California. And Mr. President, pastors and leaders of various churches in National Capital Region, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, from the Philippines for Jesus movement. May we welcome all of them today, Mr. President.
They're on your
Headed-
right side.
Yes, Mr. President, the right side and those who are in the gallery and even on the left side, Mr. President. We welcome all of them. Also,
Welcome
the
to your Senate, my dear
the,
brothers and
na-
sisters in Christ.
National President of PJM, Bishop Leo Alconga, Bishop Pantoja, Bishop Balais, Pastor Noel Casimpoy, Pastor Domeng Rivera, and others, Mr. President. We welcome all of them in this August chamber.
Welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 48th session, Wednesday, February 7, 2024, and consider the same as approved.
There be no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, may we proceed with the privilege hour, Mr. President, and may I be allowed, Mr. President, to deliver a privilege speech.
Yes, our distinguished majority floor leader, no other than Senator Joel Villanueva of Bulacan and the Republic of the Philippines is recognized to deliver his privilege speech.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Mr. President, in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, chapter 3, verse 1, and 7, verse 8, it says, "There is time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." Mr. President, I rise on a matter of personal and collective privilege. And let me also begin by quoting Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1. It says there, "A good name is to be chosen than great riches." Pinalaki po ako, Ginoong Pangulo, ng aking mga magulang sa bersikulong ito sa Biblia, na pinakamahalaga ang malinis na pangalan, far more important than gold and silver. Napakahalaga na maintindihan na ang pagkakasala sa Diyos ay mas masahol pa sa kahit anong kasalanang pwede mong magawa sa iyong kapwa-tao. Every first grader, every Sunday schooler knows that liars go to hell. Simulat sa Paul, malinaw po ang ating pamantayan, Ginoong Pangulo, maging tapat sa pagkakatawag at paglilingkod natin para sa Diyos at bayan. Kaya ngayong araw pong ito, kasama po natin sa bulwagang ito, ang aking mga kaibigan, itinuturing ko pong pamilya, mga ate, kuya, nakasama po natin, at sila po, Ginoong Pangulo, ang mga buhay na patotoo, buhay na saksi kung paano natin isinabuhay ang pamantayang ito. Ito rin po ang dahilan kung bakit tayo tumatayo ngayon, sapagkat hindi lang po dinudungisan at niyuyurakan ang ating pangalan at pagkatao, kung hindi higit po sa lahat, ang institusyon na minamahal nating lahat, ang institusyon ng Senado ng Republika ng Pilipinas. Ginoong Pangulo, mayroon pong naninira, pilit na ibinabagsak, iniinsulto, at inaalipusta ang mga miyembro ng Senado, maging ang ating pinakamamahal na institusyon. Let me set the record straight, Mr. President. At para po mas madali, true or false na lang po tayo sa mga paratang ng pinuno ng pinakamakapangyarihang komite sa Kamara de Representantes, ang may hawak ng budget, ang House Committee on Appropriations, na walang iba kung hindi itong party list representative na Zaldico. Unang paratang po sa atin, Ginoong Pangulo, may kaso daw po tayo sa Ombudsman. True or false? Ang sagot, false. Ang pinag-usapan ng gawa-gawang reklamo noon, isang sulat po na mula sa ating opisina. Ito pong gawa-gawang reklamo noon ay katawa-tawa sapagkat ang ginamit po, kung po pwede po nating ipakita, na font ay Comic Sans. Yan po ang ginamit na font, pang-comedy po. Ang letterhead po na ginamit ay Buhay Party List. Mr. President, the last time I checked, ang tatay ko po, hindi po si Brother Mike Velarde. Ngunit mahal ko po siya. Mismong NBI din po ay nag-certify. Forge, peke, ang pirma ni Joel Villanueva. Sana po maipakita natin sa screen yung pong mga binanggit ng representasyon na ito. And we are willing to wait kung hindi pa po ready, Mr. President.
Yes, if there are technical difficulties, maybe we can suspend until
Sapagkat ayaw po natin ng walang resibo at ayaw natin ng walang ebidensya.
session suspended for 1 minute.
yung Comic Sans na ginamit. Ultimo po, si King of Comedy, Dolphy, hindi po ginagamit yung ganyang font. At higit sa lahat, sana po makita natin yung dun sa taas, representative daw po ako ng Buhay Party List, Mr. President. Mr. President, ito po ay katibayan na noong mga panahon na yon, 2016 pa po ito, Mr. President, bago ho ako maluklok bilang senador ng Republika ng Pilipinas. Pine-persecute na po tayo, pinararatangan, pero tapos na po ang laban. Noon pa po, na-dismiss na po ang ibinasurang lahat ang gawa-gawang reklamo na ito sa atin. Dinismiss na po ito. Pwede ho bang pakita natin yung dinismiss na po? Mr. President, 2019 pa po, dinismiss na po ang kasong ito na ipinaparatang sa atin. Noong 2016 po, Ginoong Pangulo, ayan po yung pag-dismiss, Mr. President, ng reklamo. Hindi nga po nakarating sa korte, Ginoong Pangulo, na-dismiss na po sa probable cause pa lamang. Mr. President, noong 2016, ginamit po ito, ngunit hindi nagtagumpay. Nakakuha po tayo ng 18,459,222 votes. Noong pong 2022 elections, 18 million na naman ang nakuha po natin at talagang hindi rin po pinaniwalaan ng taong bayan. Ang mga paratang na ito na ngayon po ay inuulit ng makapangyarihang chairperson ng Committee on Appropriations. Mr. President, is the Pope Catholic? Nag-research po ba at nag-aral ang nag-aakusang ito sa atin? Ngayon po, kakalkalin ngayon ang kanyang mga kaso. Nakakalungkot po dahil kaibigan naman po natin siya. Pero dahil po pumasok siya sa away na hindi niya away, kailangan niyang magbabanggit ng mga personal attacks, kakalkalin po itong mga atraso niya sa bayan. Ito pong kumpanya niyang SunWest Corporation. True or false? Ito po ba ang isa sa pinakamalaking government contractor sa bansa? Sagot, true. True or false? Ang korporasyon po ba niyang SunWest Corporation ay kasama dito sa kontrobersyal na Farmally case dito na inimbestigahan sa Senado na kasuhan ng Senado? The answer is true. Kasama din po ba ang kumpanya niya dito po sa kontrobersyal na DepEd laptop scam? Ang sagot po, true. Pinakakasuhan din po ng Senado ang kumpanyang ito. Napakadami pong BIR cases. Madali po maghanap, Mr. President. Madali po kuhanin ang panig ng mga taga-BIR. Kung ilang kaso mayroon ang kanyang mga korporasyon. Bukod po dito, yung reklamo po sa ombudsman ng anti-corruption group na ang pangalan Task Force Kasanag International, meron din pong 50 billion na kaso na kinakaharap ang taong ito. Mr. President, kung maglalabas po kayo ng baho, Mr. President, dapat naman siguro maligo ka muna. Ang masaklap po, Ginoong Pangulo, sa kabila po ng track record na ito ni Mr. Zaldico, ang masaklap po, inappoint po siya ng Kamara de Representantes bilang tagapagbantay ng kaban ng bayan. Si Dracula, inappoint mo bilang tagapagbantay ng blood bank ng bayan. Wow, Mr. President. Kailan sa kasaysayan ng bayan natin nangyari ang ganitong pagkakataon? Na isang big-time contractor ang hahawak sa kaban ng bayan. Only in the Philippines, Mr. President. Mr. President, marami po akong pupwedeng sabihin, isa-isahin, pero hindi ko ho ngayon gustong pag-usapan ang napakarami yung kasong ito. Hindi ko po iisa-isahin. Hindi ko po pe-personalin. Marami pong panahon para sagutin itong mga ito. Pangalawang paratang sa atin, Mr. President. Minamaliit ko daw po, Mr. President. Minamaliit ni Joel Villanueva ang boto ng mga kongresista at party list. Sagot, true or false? False. Mr. President, utang ng buhay kong ito ang pagiging miyembro ng Kamara de Representantes. Paulit-ulit ko pong sinabi sa bulwagang ito, hindi ko mararating ang anumang tagumpay na narating ko sa buhay ko kung hindi po ako naging miyembro ng Kamara de Representantes. Marami po akong namimiss, Mr. President, na miyembro ng Kamara. Mahal na mahal natin. Si Representative Diggs Dilangalen, si Representative Raul Delmar, si Representative Roy Logoles, Tito Kaloy Padilla. Ang sarap pakinggan, Mr. President. Sa mga party list representative, sila ka Eta Rosales, sila ka Saturo Campo, sila ka Crispin Beltran. Mr. President, naging bahagi sila ng aking buhay. Mamaliitin ko ba ang 3,872 votes na maging kongresista ng Batanes? Bakit ko po mamaliitin? Lagi ko nga pong sinasabi, dapat pakinggan ang bawat representative ng Pilipinas. Doon po sa interpellation namin, nandito po si Senator Bato, madali po niyang ikukumpirma. Ano ba yung pinag-uusapan namin about votes? Ang topic po namin ay disenfranchisement. Ang binanggit po namin ay kung tayo po ay iluluklok ng taong bayan bilang senador, tayo po ay iluluklok ng taong bayan bilang party list representative o bilang district representative, may different roles po tayo. Ang disenfranchisement mangyayari kung bubuwagin ng Senado, kakapunin ng Senado, tinatanggalan natin ang karapatan yung mga nagluklok sa bawat miyembro ng Senado na naririto po ngayon. Mr. President, kailanman hindi natin kayang maliitin ang bawat miyembro ng Kamara de Representantes. Higit sa lahat, Mr. President, miyembro po ng Kamara at party list ang tatay ko na mas mahal ko pa kaysa sa buhay ko, Mr. President. And let the records bear that statement of this representation. Paano ko po mamaliitin ang Kamara? Ang tunay na issue, Mr. President, ay ito pong Peking People's Initiative. Dito po tayo mag-focus. Madali ho maghalit para sa akin. Madali po para magsisigaw ho dito dahil kakampi ko maraming senador. Madali po yun, Mr. President. Napakadali. Banggitin isa-isa itong kaso na ito. Ilang bilyong dito, ilang bilyon doon. Madali po sabihin, pero hindi po yun ang focus. Ang focus po natin, Mr. President, at hindi tayo dapat maging personal, ay banggitin natin itong bigger issue. This issue which is bigger than myself, which is bigger than you and me, which is bigger than this institution, Mr. President, and this is the soul of our nation, our Constitution, Mr. President. Imagine, Mr. President, true or false, Mr. President? Gusto ba ng taong bayan itong mabahong PI o Peking People's Initiative, Politicians Initiative na ito? Yung OCTA po, sabi 1% lang ang naniniwala na may halaga itong tsa-tsa. Noong January 31, ang CBCP nagbigay po ng pahayag na sabi po nila, hindi tayo basta lalagda o papayag sa kahit anong petisyon sa COMELEC. Ayan po ang sinabi ng CBCP. Can we show the CBCP resolution, Your Honors? Ayan po. Noong pong isang linggo, February 11, ang Philippines for Jesus Movement ay naglabas po ng isang manifesto laban sa Peking People's Initiative. Mr. President, maliwanag pa po sa sikat ng araw. Hindi ito ang prioridad ng taong bayan. Lalo na't maraming Pilipino ang nagugutom at nahihirapan. Hindi na po nakakayanan ng ating mga kababayan yung presyo, taas ng presyo ng bigas, sardinas, kape, gatas, instant noodles, maging asin, at iba pa. Nagluluksa pa rin hanggang ngayon ang maraming kababayan natin. Biktima ng baha at landslide doon po sa Davao. Nagsimula na ang El Nino, Mr. President. Anong magagawa nitong peking PI sa El Nino? May haharapin tayong tagtuyot. May haharaping tagtuyot ang ating mga magsasaka, Mr. President. Mga kababayan natin na hanggang sa buwan ng Mayo haharapin ang El Nino. Bagsak pa rin ang kalidad ng edukasyon. Andyan po ang mga commissioners ng EDCOM sa pamumuno ni Senator Gatchalian. Kulelat pa rin ang mga estudyante natin sa PISA. Mga bagong graduates, below minimum wage. Below minimum wage ang tinatanggap. Mr. President, napakatindi ng traffic, tinitiis ng mga manggagawa natin ang araw-araw na kalbaryo. Mga OFWs natin na di-displace, Mr. President. Mga kababayan po natin na nagtatrabaho katulad ng nangyari sa New Zealand, doon po sa Saudi Arabia. Mr. President, hirap na yung taong bayan. Pero, pabaho at peking PI pa rin ang gustong asikasuhin ng mga taong nagtutulak nito. At nung mahuli, mayabang lang kayo. Senado, papogi lang kayo. Senado, gawin nyo to, gawin nyo yan. Mr. President, ano ba talagang layunin ng mga taong nagsusulong ng peking PI? Tanggalin ang Senado sa napakahalaga at napakasagradong proseso ng pag-amyenda o pagrebisa ng ating Constitution. Is this true or false? True, Mr. President, ang sagot. Iyan po ang nakalagay sa pinapipirmahan nila. Mr. President, may nanununog ng bahay natin, nahuli natin, may dalang sulo, sinusunog ang ating mga poste ng bahay natin, at nung mahuli natin sila, sa halip na magpakumbaba, sa halip na aminin na sila'y nagkamali, sila pa po ang galit, Mr. President. Sila pa po yung nambubuli. At nung mahuli po natin, ayaw pa rin pong umamin sa kanilang kasalanan. Sa halip po, minumura tayo, tinitira tayo ng below the belt, kesyo pangit tayo, mayabang tayo, etc. Sila pa ang galit at sabi pa sa atin, hoy, pagluto mo pa ako. Hoy, next week, ipasa mo to. Mr. President, hindi ho punching bag ang Senado. Naniniwala akong hindi tayo papayag maging punching bag, Mr. President. Sa mga kababayan po nating nanonood ngayon, sa mga kababayan po nating sumusubaybay, kapag nangyari po ang gusto nilang pagbabago sa konstitusyon, mababaliwala po ang inyong Senado. At mas magiging madali ng magpalit ng konstitusyon kaysa magpalit ng pangalan ng kalye. Ito po ba ang gusto natin dito sa Pilipinas? Uulitin ko po. Gusto nilang buwagin at tanggalin ang boses ng Senado samantalang hindi mabilang ng mga landmark legislations na tinrabaho ng mga miyembro ng Senado. Uunahin ko na po kayo, Senate President, yung Bangsamoro Organic Law. Kung wala po kayo, hindi ko kayo nagsulong nito, hindi ko magiging batas ito. Si Senator Loren Legarda, kung hindi pinangunahan itong Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Ecological Solid Waste Act, may mangyayari po kaya? Si Senator JB, kung wala, may Universal Healthcare Act kaya? Si Senator Risa, kung wala, may expanded maternity leave law kaya? Mr. President, si Senator Angara, meron kayang Tatak Pinoy, may regional specialty centers. Si Senator Binay, meron kayang expanded NIPAS Act, Anti-Child Sexual Abuse or Exploitation Materials Act. Si Senator Alan Cayetano, meron kayang Good Manners and the Values Education Act. Meron kayang Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. Meron kayang Bayanihan to Recover as One Act na isinulong ni Senator Alan Cayetano. Si Senator Pia Cayetano, meron kayang Reproductive Health Act, may Cheaper Medicines Act, meron kayang Sin Tax Reform Law, etc. Si Senator Bato, meron kayang BFP Modernization Act. At just recently, itong PNP Reorganization Act. Si Senator Jinggoy, kung wala, meron kung kaya itong strengthening professionalism and promoting the continuity of policies and modernization initiatives in the AFP. At higit sa lahat, mamaya itatakel na natin yung pagtaas ng sweldo ng mga manggagawa. Kung wala si Senator Win, meron kayang Excellence in Teacher Education Act. Kung wala si Senator Bongo, meron kayang mga malasakit center sa Pilipinas. Kung wala si Senator Grace po, meron kayang amendments to the Public Services Act. Kung wala po si Senator Bong Revilla, meron kayang Teaching Supplies Allowance Act. Wala si Senator Tolentino, meron kayang resetting itong mga nangyaring kailangang eleksyon at itong mga paglilitis at pag-iimbestiga ng Senado sa mga anomalya na nangyayari sa ating bayan. Kung wala si Senator Amy Marcos, anong kayang amendments to the Foreign Investments Act? Mr. President, I can go on and on and on, Mr. President. Kung gaano karami ang tinrabaho ng inyong Senado, hindi para sa personal na interes, hindi para lumawig ang aming mga termino, hindi para lumaki ang pondo na aming kailangang hawakan. Mr. President, Ginoong Pangulo, patuloy po akong nagdadasal. Patuloy kong ipinagdadasal ang ating mga kasamahan sa Kamara de Representantes. Lalo na po si Ginoong Zaldico. Mr. President, kung ayaw niya pong maniwala sa akin, i-quote ko na lang po yung sinabi ni Speaker Martin Romualdez. Don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. Yan po ang sinabi ni Speaker. Sana po marinig po ng ating mga kasamahan. Pinapanalangin ko po na bigyan tayo nawa ng Panginoong Diyos ng lakas, talino, maging kakayahan para magpatawad, Ginoong Pangulo, at pagtuunan ng pansin higit sa lahat. Ano po ba ang tunay na kailangan ng bayan ngayon? At ipanalo natin ang taong bayan. Sa halip na pagtuunan natin ng pansin kung sinong mas magaling, kung sinong mas magandang lalaki o kung sino man ang mas mayabang. Hindi po ang mabaho at peking People's Politicians Initiative ang kailangan ni Juan de la Cruz. Sa tindi po ng kahirapan, sa tindi ng traffic, sa tindi ng gutom, hindi po PI ang kailangan. Ang kailangan po, Mr. President, ni Juan de la Cruz ay pambili ng gamot. Kailangan po niya ng pagkain sa hapagkainan nila. Ang kailangan po niya ay dekalidad na edukasyon. Ang kailangan po niya ay trabaho at magandang kita. Nawa, Ginoong Pangulo, matuldukan na ang mabaho at peking People's Initiative. Marami na pong nagawa ang inyong Senado, pero kulang pa. At alam ko po, bilang miyembro ng institusyong ito, na marami pa tayong magagawa para sa bayan. Kaya magtrabaho po tayo. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pabulo. Mabuhay ang Senado ng Republika ng Pilipinas.
Maraming salamat, Senator Joel Villanueva. Session suspended for 1 minute. colleagues would like to be recognized. Senator JV?
Yes, Mr. President, Senator Pia Cayetano seeking the floor. I move that she be recognized.
Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized. Our distinguished colleague from Pateros and Taguig.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just a short intervention with the permission of our colleague, the Majority Floor Leader. Mr. President, I would just like to share my observations with everyone. Ever since the Senate, ever since it came to our attention, and I think we were not yet in session yet, we had met, we had discussed, and we had all, most of us at least, have expressed alarm. Nagpahayag tayo ng shock, ng kaba, ng takot na yung umiiral at yung umiiral na ang pagkakalat ng papirma ng PI parang panloloko sa tao. And si Majority Floor Leader Joel Villanueva was one of the most outspoken and vocal. Number one kasi magaling naman talaga ang communication skills ni Senator Joel. So ginagamit niya yung presence niya sa social media at masipag ho siya magpa-interview para ipaliwanag yung issue. Sa akin pong natatandaan, issue-based parate ang mga statements niya. Tinatanong niya na ano bang laman ng PI na pinipirmahan ng mga kababayan natin na kapos na nga sa pera, hindi mapakain ng mga anak nila. Tapos kung talagang gusto nilang pagbabago, okay. Pero ano ba yung pinipirmahan nila na PI na yan? So dahil sa mga ipinakita niya, pati tayong mga internal na discussion natin, kasama mga ibang kasamahan natin dito sa Senado, including Senator Amy, Senator Lauren, marami ho sa atin. Nag-usap-usap tayo, yun nga, wala pa hong session noon. And nakita natin, nakakuha tayo ng mga kopya nung pinapapirmahan na People's Initiative, ni wala ngang nakasulat po doon na probisyon ng batas na kunyari tungkol sa pagandahin ng livelihood o pamurahin ang gamot o yung bigas at yung mga magsasaka at mangingisda mabigyan ng suporta. Walang ganun eh. Tungkol ho yun dun sa voting jointly at voting separately. Ang effect po nung pinapapirmahan na voting jointly, mawawalan ng boses ang Senado na since time immemorial, bumoboto separately, pati nga ho para sa isang paggawa ng bagong kalye. So yun lang naman yung mga paliwanag ni Senator Joel. So nagtataka ako na ang response na nakuha niya, hindi lang pambabatikos, kasi kayang-kaya naman ang balat ni Senator Joel. Senator Amy, wag mo munang kausapin si Senator Joel kasi gusto ko naman, hindi kasi meron akong sasabihin tungkol sa balat niya eh. Kaya gusto ko full attention kayong lahat. Ang alam ko kasi yung balat ni Senator Joel, hindi malipis. Nagbabasketball po yun sa ilalim ng araw. Testigo po dyan si Senator Angara. I'm sure kahit kalmut-kalmutin ko yan, hindi malaparuselana yung balat niyan. Makapal po yung balat niyan, balat kalabaw po yan. Hindi ho yan maarte, hindi po yan maselan. Kung makipagbiruan nga yun dito, last ho yan na mapipikon. Hindi ko pa nga ho nakitang pikon yan eh. Pero, pag naman yung nagbigay siya ng pahayag o kaya yun nga, yung mga statement niya sa media kung saan inilalabas lang niya yung kailangan maintindihan ng tao na epekto nung pinipirmahan nila na may ebidensya na may mga grupong nagpapapirma. Bakit hindi siya sagutin ng maayos tungkol doon? Kung yung mga taong natatamaan, bakit hindi sila magpaliwanag na hindi ganito ho yun, yung pinapapirma namin, ganito. Bakit ang balik, kung ano-anong kasinungalingan na iniimbento para, dungisan ang mabuting pangalan ni Senator Joel Villanueva? Hindi ho nagagawa ng basta-basta yun. Kahit anong pagdudungis na ginawa nyo. Ang taong may takot sa Diyos, yung totoong takot sa Diyos, hindi ho yan kayang madungisan, hindi ho yan. Kumbaga, parang water and oil lang po yan. Paano ko ba sasabihin sa Tagalog yon? O kahit sa English?
Tubig at langis.
Tubig at langis. Alam niyo na yon. Tubig at langis, hindi ho naghahalo yon. So, kung may ibabatikos na maayos sana, Eh di, pakinggan din natin. Pero yung basta-basta lang may mga allegations na para lang siraan ang pagkatao ng isang kasamahan natin na buong buhay niya binigay niya sa taong bayan, sa Diyos. Hindi ho tama yun. At tayo din ho dito ay naninindigan. Nagbibigay ng suporta dahil ang kaibigan natin, ang gusto niyang gawin trabaho. Araw-araw po yan, mga kaibigan, mga kababayan. Araw-araw siyang nagme-message sa amin kung ano agenda. Tapos, maraming nagagalit sa kanya kasi, kunyari, gusto ko una yung sa akin. Gusto din ni Senator Angara, una din yung sa kanya. Gusto din ni Senator Bato, una yung sa kanya. Gusto din ni kami-kami, ito talaga si Joel, inuna yung sa kanya, inuna yung sa kanya. So, si Senator Bato, yan ang pinakahuling uuwi kasi mag-giveaway yan. Mag-giveaway yan sa akin para mauwian ko yung anak ko. Maraming salamat. Siya lahat sumasalo noon, mga kababayan. He is a hardworking, honest senator. And he took time. He took time out of his job. Nagagalit nga siya na kailangan niyang tumayo dito para ipaliwanag yun dahil gusto niya trabaho agad. Gusto niya yung minimum wage bill ng ating Senate President na halos lahat na yata po kami co-sponsor. Yan ang pag-usapan. But we cannot also allow na basta-basta kung nagbabato, nagtatapon, nag-iimbento ng kasinungalingan ang mga ibang tao laban sa isang humble and simple public servant in the person of our brother, Senator Joel Villanueva, Mr. President. You don't have to react. I just wanted to make that statement, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me just put on the records, Mr. President, my sincerest thanks and appreciation to our dear colleagues. Hindi ko nabanggit dun sa speech yung unang-unang nagtanggol ho sa akin, sila Senator Nancy at si Senator Chis, para sagutin yung mga below the belt na paninira sa atin. Appreciate it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Yes. Also for the record, bilang Senate President ng institusyon na ito, I have to give my hats off at saludo po ako sa iyo, sa ating Majority Floor Leader, dahil sa sipag at tiyaga mo na harapin ang lahat ng mga problema ng ating mga kasamahan dito sa institusyon ng ito. Yung institusyon na to. Bilang Majority Floor Leader, nakaranas po ako 3 beses na maging Majority Floor Leader. Napakahirap ng trabaho yan. Balansin ang iba't ibang interest ng ating mga senador, lalo na sa pagsulat ng mga batas. Kaya I know you're under extreme pressure. But on a personal note, alam na alam ko, kayang-kaya mo yan. Napaka galing nitong Majority Floor Leader, nag-aaral, yan ang pinakamaganda. At napaka-honest. Sa totoo lang, napaka-honest. Kaya nga si Bak yan eh. Di ba? Citizens Against Crime and Corruption. Yan ang away niya. That is his advocacy, anti-corruption. Advocacy niya. He's anti-corruption fighter. Kaya nakakatawa ang mga paratang ng isang miyembro ng mababang kapulungan sa ating kasamahan. And I hope that our friends in the House are circumspect. Hindi magandang mga paratang na ganyan. It is not good for interparliamentary courtesy. Tayo dito po ay nagtatrabaho na po. Ang dami na po natin na ipasa at na yung araw na ito, may ipapasa po tayo para sa masang Pilipino na sa tingin ko ang makakatulong sa pag-angat ng kahirapan, sa kahirapan ng ating mga kababayan. Yan ang dapat tutukan natin. Nabigyan natin ginhawa ang ating mga mahihirap nating kababayan through legislation, through legislative work, my dear colleagues. We never as senators overstep our bounds. We do not act like presidents here. We are all legislators. We do not overstep our powers. We do not overstep our bounds and boundaries. We just do our job well. That's why saludo ako sa iyo, Majority Leader Joel Villanueva. Mabuhay po kayo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. President, next, Senator Sonny Angara is seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized.
Our distinguished colleague from the province of Aurora and the Republic of the Philippines, Senator Sunny Angara is recognized.
Mr. President, I just want to, hindi ko rin papalipasin po yung itong moment na ito. I'd like to second what you said, what Senator Pia said, what our majority leader said, that the focus should be on the issue, the public issue, which is the Peking People's Initiative, Mr. President. And I admire our distinguished majority leader, our dear friend, like a brother to us, always working hard for our interest. In fact, he even singled out our pet advocacies. Ganun ho siya. He took the time out to single out. And he was a very vital part in passing many, if not all, of these measures, and we thank him for that. I know many times he feels underappreciated, but we truly, truly appreciate the work. He and his team, I think it's worth mentioning. It's not just one person. To pass a bill into law, it takes effort. All our staff, nagpupuyat po yan. And kumbaga, ang namumuno dyan is you, Mr. President, our Senate President Pro Tem, and of course, our Majority Leader, along with the chairpersons of the respective committees, Mr. President. Hindi biro yung proseso ng pagsasabatas ng isang panukala. It's no joke. That's why akala ng iba it's like just checking off a box, di ba? Hindi po ganun yun. Marami pong konsultasyon yun. Kaya natawa ako nung sabi, maglatag na daw tayo ng posisyon. Paano tayo maglalatag ng posisyon? Kakaumpisa lang ng mga hearing. Di ba? Parang pinakita na parang hindi kailangan yung hearing. Kumbaga seremonya na lang ho siya. No, it's an actual, honest to goodness, public consultation. Ginawa ba nila yon sa PI? Parang wala akong narinig na public consultation, Mr. President. Di ba? Parang ginawa nila nung nagse-celebrate tayo ng Christmas at New Year. Parang fast break, kumbaga. Di ba? Kung fast break lang, wala nang mas gagaling sa majority leader natin. Tsaka Senator Bongo, magaling din sa fast break.
Sa basketball.
Sa basketball. Hindi sa pagsasabatas. Sa pagsasabatas, wala dapat fast break. Dahil parang mababa ang tingin natin sa kababayan natin, Mr. President, kapag finast break natin yung pagsasabatas. At saka hindi pangkaraniwang batas ito, Mr. President. Saligang batas ang pinag-uusapan ito. I paraphrase our distinguished majority leader. It's the soul of our nation. Di ba? Hindi tayo pwede magpasa ng batas sa Kongreso na taliwas sa ating saligang batas. Ganun po kataas, ganun po kadakila ang ating saligang batas. So it's not something to trifle with. Hindi po biro, hindi po hindi seryosong usapan ito. Parang minamaliit nga natin yung taong bayan kung minamadali natin ito, Mr. President. At dinadaan natin sa salapi at sa iba-ibang pamamaraan na kumbinsihin po sila. So I'd like to pay tribute to our majority leader for fighting for our institution, but more than that, Mr. President, for fighting for the Filipino people, Mr. President. Saludo po ako sa kanya at sa inyo na nakipaglaban itong nakarang mga linggo, Mr. President. At also on the issue of interparliamentary courtesy, ang focus talaga yung PI, Mr. President. Kung may natamaan dyan, hindi namin sinasadya yan. And in fact, I think Senator Amy was clear. She respected interparliamentary courtesy by not summoning or inviting the members of the House. She did not even send subpoenas to the chiefs of staff of the congressmen because nga she was conscious about the possible violation of interparliamentary courtesy. Ang nagsabi na nakipag-meeting po sila, hindi mga senador, kundi yung mga testigo na nag-oath na sasabihin nila yung totoo. Kaya muntik na nga makalimutan ng isang resource person, di ba sabi niya, it skipped my mind. Pala nakipag-meeting po siya sa mga liderato ng Kamara de Representante. Kaya po, Mr. President, pag nag-i-invoke tayo ng parliamentary courtesy, alamin muna natin anong ibig sabihin nito. Di ba? Dapat alam natin anong ibig sabihin ng sinasabi natin o ini-invoke natin. So anyway, Mr. President, I did not want to let the moment pass and express support for our dear friend, the Majority Leader, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat, Senator Angara.
Mr. President, likewise, before I move to refer the privilege speech of our Majority Leader, of course, as his Deputy Majority Leader, I'd like to I'm a witness on how hard our majority leader works. Mr. President, we are the first and the last to leave the floor. Even during the budget season, we are here from 9 a.m. sometimes to the wee hours in the morning. Kami-kami lang nandito, Mr. President. Ilan po lang tayo. Unlike the other house, there are a lot. Pero dito, ilan lang po tayo. And even I would say that I'm very proud to be part of this leadership, to be a deputy majority leader. No, none better than our majority leader. And even during our light moments, Mr. President, we are talking about how we can do something to improve the lives of our people. Yan po ang hindi alam ng ating mga kababayan. Hindi tayo nagtatanong kung ano magandang relo, ano magandang kotse, ano ang uso. Mr. President, even during our light moments, pinag-uusapan natin ano ang pwede nating gawin. Paano natin matutulungan ang ating Defense Department pagdating sa West Philippine Sea, how we can improve agriculture, kung ano-ano pinag-uusapan natin. Siguro yan ang hindi alam ng ating makabayan na kahit po.
Pati paano natin ibaba yung sobrang grabing talamak na korupsyon sa ating bansa.
Opo.
Oh,
That's why, Mr. President, I'm proud to serve under your leadership, our Senate President, Mig Subiri, Majority Floor Leader, Joel Villanueva. I'm proud of this institution. Pero kailanman, Mr. President, I will not also look down on our counterparts because we all came from there. We know how it functions. We are also concerned for our districts. Magkaibang functions natin eh. But I will always cherish the years that I spent in the House of Representatives. Kailanman hindi naman natin sila inaaway, Mr. President. So with that, Mr. President, again, to our majority leader.
There's still two other members.
Yes,
We'll just
Senator
put-
Cayetano
Senator
is,
Pia
taking the
Cayetano
floor.
is,
I just, Mr. President, with the indulgence of the Deputy Majority Floor Leader, meron ba siyang gustong ipahiwatig na may ibang grupo na imbis na trabaho ang pinag-uusapan, puro ibang bagay? You don't have to answer. I'm
Wala naman po.
posing the
Kasi
question.
parang isang ano lang naman, parang isang grupo, isang barkada on light moments, pinag-uusapan natin kung ano yung mga bagay-bagay. Pero I'm proud, kahit nasa lounge tayo, di ba? Dapat light moments na yun, pero pinag-uusapan pa rin natin yung ating trabaho. And even yesterday, doon po sa farm ni Senator Villanueva, pinag-uusapan pa rin natin kung ano ang ating pwedeng gawin. And again, Mr. President, hindi naman dahil but I am very proud to have made this comeback in the Senate and serve under your leadership. And my majority leader, ako'y proud na proud bilang kanyang deputy. That's why I don't complain. Kahit na ako'y first in, last out dito sa Senado. I will always be here because I'm proud of what we are doing here in the Senate.
And also, I want to take note that without you, wala tayong Department of Housing, Senator JB, ha? And also for Senator Joel, yung ating napakaraming batas on higher education, training, DMW, yung Department of Migrant Workers is your baby. And many others that was adopted, by the way, by the House. Talagang trabaho para sa bayan, yung doktor para sa bayan, and also the work from home na bill natin na ginawa mong batas. So we'd like to recognize our distinguished colleague from Bohol and from Davao region, no other than Senator Bato de la Rosa, another fighter. Your honors.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I don't want to violate my self-declared ceasefire per your advice. But hindi ko palalampasin itong pagkakataon na ito. Hindi para tirahin yung ating mga kasamahan sa kabilang kapulungan, kundi para magbigay ng suporta sa ating very passionate, very honest at ewan ko bakit siya ang paboritong tirahin personally ng mga kasamahan natin sa kabilang kapulungan. I would like to express my interest to be identified with the privileged speech delivered by our majority leader. Sabi ko nga sa kanya, Mr. President, kung ako man ay tutungtong sa boxing ring or sa wrestling ring at ako'y lalaban ng tag team, yung tag team na wrestling, Mr. President, wala ko ibang pipiliin talaga na katag team ko, si Majority Leader Senator Joel Villanueva.
Yan.
Dahil sa kanya prinsipyo, Mr. President. Dahil sa aking paniniwala na siya ay talagang tao na malinis, siya ay tao na honest, siya ay tao na nagsasalita ng totoo at walang tinatago. Kung siya ay kung gusto niya ipaglaban yung institusyon, gusto niya ipaglaban ang konstitusyon, ipinaglaban niya yung mga tao na naiisahan, ay talagang very passionate siya na ipaglaban, Mr. President. Kaya sana po, unsolicited advice to those who want to attack Senator Joel Villanueva, please attack him on the issues that we are tackling. Do not attack him personally. Because kung personal na atakan ito, you will be attacking the 23 senators are solidly behind Senator Joel Villanueva. So if you attack Senator Joel Villanueva, you are attacking the whole 24 senators, Mr. President. That's how we do it here in the Senate. And I would like to follow up on the statement of Senator Angara na dito po sa Senado, wala pong pasbreakan dito, Mr. President. Wala pong blind pass dito, Mr. President. Kung sa mag-schedule, walang dunk dito, Mr. President. Puro deliberate ang trabaho dito. Dinidribble ng mabuti ang bola, pinapasa ng mabuti, hinahanapan ng magandang pwesto kung sinong pwedeng mag-jump shot, Mr. President. Wala pong dunk dito. Kaya huwag sana tayo madaliin ang ating mga kasamahan sa pag-amend ng ating konstitusyon dahil sabi nga ni Senator Angara, we are not amending just a simple law, Mr. President. We are amending the very heart and soul of the nation, which is the Constitution. So sana pagbigyan naman nila tayo. Mabuti sana kung hindi tayo gumagalaw. Lunes na Lunes, first hour in the morning, si Senator Angara nag-hearing na sa kanyang subcommittee on constitutional amendments. Kaya huwag naman sana tayo, para naman tayong, I don't know how to describe the situation, Mr. President, but we are working, we are deliberating on it, pinag-usapan, pinagdebatihan, hindi po fast break ang trabaho namin dito. Kaya po, we are not after of quantity, we are after of quality, Mr. President. Hindi po ito payabangan kung ilang batas ang napapasa ninyo. Pinapasa ninyo kung wala yung magkasamahan o ano ba, magpapalusot tayo. Hindi natin ginagawa yan dito. Nirespeto natin ang isa't isa sa 24 na senador. Kung siya may oposisyon sa batas na pinapanday natin, pinapakinggan natin siya. At nirespeto natin yung kanyang punto. Kaya po, sabihin man yung mabagal, pero maganda ang kinalabasan dahil nga pinag-usapan ng gusto ang mga batas dito. Lalong-lalo na sa pag-aminda ng ating konstitusyon. Kaya, Mr. President, I just would like to assure our majority leader, wherever you go, I am with you, and I will support you, and I will fight for you till death. Thank you, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat, Senator Bato de la Rosa, the true fighter of the Senate. Maganda kung kasangga mo si Senator Bato de la Rosa.
Yes, Mr. President. I move that we refer the privileged speech of our majority leader and all the manifestations thereon to the Committee on Electoral Reform and People's Participation. I so move, Mr. President.
Yes, and before that, I'd like to also put on record, I think it would be good, Senator Angara, that we also do out-of-town public hearings. We should have one in the Visayas, we should have one in Mindanao, para mapakinggan din natin, di ba, Senator Bato, yung sentimento ng mga taga Mindanao, yung sentimento ng mga taga Visayas. Para sa ganun ay well-informed ang decision natin when the time comes.
With your permission, Mr. President, I actually told the media that you told me that it would be a good idea. And tinatanong na nila kailan daw, kung before Easter daw, at saka kung pwede daw sa Boracay, kung Visayas, tsaka kung...
Wag naman social doon. Doon tayo sa mga Cebu siguro, yung mga
May
malalaking...
suggestion lang, may nag-suggest lang, Mr. President. I'm just passing it to you. You are the ultimate decision maker. Thank you, boss. I think it's a good,
We'll just wait
it's a
for
good
your-
suggestion, Mr. President. Yeah.
We'll just wait for your schedules. So, once again, the motion is Senator JV, our Deputy Majority.
Yes, I reiterate my motion, Mr. President. I move that we refer the privileged speech of our majority leader and manifestation thereon to the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary, there being no objection, let's proceed with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 2535, an act regulating the practice of the agriculture profession in the Philippines, creating for the purpose of professional regulatory board for agriculturists and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Civil Service and Finance.
2536, professionalizing the government accounting service to serve as a tool for effective management and control of government resources, creating for the purpose the Government Accountancy Office under the Department of Budget and Management and for other purposes, Senator Go.
To the Committees on Civil Service and Finance.
2537, strengthening the mechanical engineering profession, amending for the purpose sections 33 and 34 of RA 8495, Senator Go.
To the Committees on Civil Service and Professional Regulation.
2538, providing for a Magna Carta of Government Accountants, Senator Go.
Committee on Civil Service.
2539, increasing the bed capacity of the Philippine General Hospital from 1,500 beds to 2,200 and appropriating beds and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Go.
To the Committees on Health, Demography, and Finance.
2540, providing for the administrative reform and reorganization of the Philippine Coast Guard, revising for the purpose RA 9993, Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Public Service, Public Services, Civil Service, Ways and Means, and Finance.
2541, expanding the benefits of science and technology scholarship grantees or of agriculture, geology, and meteorology programs, amending RA 7687, Senator Lapid.
Committee on Science and Technology, and Committee on Finance.
Senate number 2542, further amending PD 1606 as amended by RA 7975, 8249, and 10660, establishing territorial jurisdiction of RTCs on cases involving corrupt practices and acts committed by public officials, Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
2543, providing for the establishment of a digital prison record system by the Bureau of Corrections and Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Justice, Human Rights, Science and Technology, and Finance.
2544, institutionalizing the establishment of Veterans Hospital in Visayas and Mindanao, Senator Villar M.
To the Committee on Health, Demography, National Defense, and Security, and Finance.
Resolution, proposed Senate Resolution 927, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry into the unwarranted presence of various intergovernmental organizations that pose a threat to the country's independent sovereignty, Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights and Foreign Relations. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2505 under Committee Report number 175. This pertains to the Eddie Garcia bill. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have closed the period of interpellations and debate. With the consent of the body, I now move to open the period of amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
President, with no committee amendments, I move to close the period of committee amendments and open the period of individual amendments and recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, Senator Jinggoy Ejercito Estrada, to introduce his amendments. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved. Our distinguished colleague, Senator Jigo Estrada, the Chairman of the Committee on Labor, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as your chairperson of the Committee on Labor, this representation will be introducing individual amendments to Senate Bill number 2505 under Committee Report number 175 or the Eddie Garcia Law. This is a product of extensive consultations with all the stakeholders in the movie and television industry. I would also like to thank our colleagues, especially our Senate President Pro Temp, Lauren Legarda, Majority Leader Senator Joel Villanueva, Minority Floor Leader Senator Coco Pimentel, Deputy Minority Leader Senator Rizon Tiveros, Senator Pia Cayetano, and Senator Grace Poe for helping us refine the provisions of this measure, Mr. President. Mr. President, to start it off, on page 1, maybe the Majority Floor
Mr.
Leader.
President, may I just introduce an amendment, Mr. President, on page 1, declaration of policy. Page 1, line 6 to 9, delete the phrase starting with the word should until the word exploitation, and in lieu thereof, insert the phrase shall promote and strengthen observance of decent work, comprehensive social protection coverage to all sectors of the industry, including the self-employed, the free exercise of the right to self-organization, and to collectively bargain. The the development and competitiveness of the industry and skills upgrading in all sectors of the industry. So, Mr. President, the sentence will now read as follows. Towards this end, the state shall promote and strengthen observance of decent work, comprehensive social protection coverage to all sectors of the industry, including the self-employed, the free exercise of the right to self-organization, and to collectively bargain the development and competitiveness of the industry and skills upgrading in all sectors of the industry. I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
The amendment is accepted, therefore approved. Please proceed.
Mr. President, on page 1, the same page, lines 9 and 10, insert a new paragraph which shall read as follows. Accordingly, a review of the working conditions in the industry shall be undertaken regularly to ensure that workers are provided opportunities for gainful employment or work engagements and decent income, and are protected from abuse, harassment, hazardous working conditions, and economic exploitation. I submit to the wisdom of our chairman.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Amendment is accepted and approved.
Mr. President, another amendment, Mr. President, on page 1, line 11, after the word industry, insert the following phrase: regardless of functions, roles, positions, or status. So section 3 will now read as follows. Section 3, coverage. This act applies to all workers engaged in the movie and television industry, regardless of functions, roles, positions, or status. I submit, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr.
The
President.
amendment is accepted and approved.
No more in page 1, Mr. President, unless the chairperson.
Yes.
Page-
I will introduce
one.
my individual amendments. Yes, on page 1.
Yes.
On page 1, Mr. President, lines 13 to 14, delete the phrase a person, group of persons, or an entity that, and replace the same with the following: any person, natural or juridical, including contractor or subcontractor who. I submit, Mr. President.
There have been no objection to the amendment. Amendments approved.
So section 4A shall now read as follows. Employer or principal refers to any person, natural or juridical, including contractor or subcontractor who engages or hires the services of a worker in the movie and television industry. So on page 2, line 9, Mr. President, between the words related and digital, insert the phrase online or. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been no objection. Motion is approved.
And after the word digital, replace the word medium with platform. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been no objection. Amendment is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first sentence of section 4 shall now read as follows. Movie and television industry refers to any market of sound and visual components primarily produced, distributed, and exhibited for commercial purposes in movie and television, including any related online or digital platform. So on page 2, Mr. President, lines 13 and 15, delete the entire phrase starting from any person in line 13 until television content in line 15, and replace the same with the following. An employee hired by the employer or an independent contractor engaged by the principal to render services for the movie and television industry. So section 4E of the bill shall now read as follows. Worker refers to an employee hired by the employer or an independent contractor engaged by the principal to render services for the movie and television industry. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been no objection. Amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the majority floor leader has
Yes, Mr. President.
wants to
Mr.
introduce
President,
some
if I
amendments.
may, on page 2, line 23, after the word act, insert a comma and the following phrase. Presidential Decree number 442 as amended, or the Labor Code of the Philippines, Republic Act number 11058, entitled An Act Strengthening Compliance with Occupational Safety and Health Standards and Providing Penalties for Violations thereof, and other applicable laws. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, and is it accepted?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Therefore,
President.
amendments approved.
Thank you. May I proceed, Mr. President? On
Please
page
proceed.
2, line 28, between the words signed and contract, insert the phrase agreement or employment. So the first sentence of section 7 shall now read as follows. Section 7, content of the agreement or employment contract. The employer or principal shall provide the worker a copy of the duly signed agreement or employment contract, which shall include the following. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, on page 2, line 32, replace the word service with engagement. So subsection C of section 7 shall now read as follows. Period of employment or engagement. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to amendment, amendments approved.
I yield the floor to the Majority Leader, Mr.
Yes,
President.
Mr. President, on page 3, line 2, let me introduce an amendment. Page 3, line 2, after the word payment, insert the following phrase, which shall be paid at intervals not exceeding 16 days unless otherwise agreed upon by the parties, such that section 7, letter D, will now read as follows. Details of compensation and other workers' benefits include rate, method, and schedule of payment, which shall be paid at intervals not exceeding 16 days unless otherwise agreed upon by the parties. I submit, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you very much,
There
Mr.
being no
President.
objection by the sponsor, amendments accepted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. On page 3, line 4, delete the phrase and proportionate additional payment or overtime pay. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, amendments approved.
Again, on page 3, line 5, delete the whole text of subsection C. I so move, Mr. President.
There,
Subsection
G.
G.
G. There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
Again, on page 3, line 6, delete the word workers. And at the end of the phrase, replace the semicolon with a period. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 3 again, delete line 7 until line 10. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Again, on page 3, line 13, after the word contract, replace the period with a comma and add a new phrase that will read as follows. Nor shall any person perform any act involving preference based on race, color, descent, national or ethnic origin, or religion, which has the purpose or effect of nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on equal footing of any human right or fundamental freedom. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
The Majority Leader
Yes,
may...
Mr. President, on that particular page, page 3, line 13, after the word freedom, in the amendment introduced by the sponsor, insert a colon and the following proviso, provided that exclusivity shall be reasonable in accordance with law. I submit, Mr. President.
Yes.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr.
Accepted,
President.
subject to style.
If I may continue, Mr. President, on page 3, line 16 to 17, delete the sentence that reads, the following terms and conditions are deemed written in the agreement or employment contract. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Again, on page 3, under subsection A of section 9, on line 18, delete the letter A, indicating a subsection. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Between the article the and the word work, delete the word normal as proposed by our minority leader, Coco Pimentel. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, it's approved.
Before the word work, insert the words hours of. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Between the words work and shall, delete the word hours. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
And delete the phrase, the following in lines 21 to 22. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Delete the entire section I. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Delete the numbering double I in line 29. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
Change the word minors to lowercase. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, motions approved.
The second paragraph of section 9 shall now read as follows. The hours of work shall be 8 hours a day, which can be extended to a maximum of 14 hours, exclusive of meal periods, period. In no case shall the total number of work hours be more than 60 hours in a week. It shall be applicable to all workers except for minors whose working hours shall be in accordance with the pertinent provisions of Republic Act number 9231 or the Special Protection of Children Against Child Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act.
There have been, yes,
That will be
the new
the new
amended
provision.
section.
Yes, Mr. President. On page 3, after line 31, insert a new paragraph, which shall read as follows. However, for workers requiring special effects, makeup, such as prosthetics, the first 2 hours of application of such makeup shall not be considered as working hours. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, before line 1, insert the phrase, hours of work shall include the following. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, line 1, replace the letter of subsection B with A. Delete the phrase, work hours include, and in the word waiting, change the lowercase letter W to uppercase. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, line 3, replace the letter of subsection C with B. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, lines 4 to 5, delete the phrase, are considered work hours and are compensable. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, between lines 5 and 6, insert a new subsection C. That will read as follows. Travel to and from out-of-town projects, provided that the worker cannot gainfully utilize the travel time for one's own personal purpose, need, or benefit. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, line 6, delete the letter D and the parenthesis. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, deletes lines 10 to 21. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, line 22, delete the letter I and the parenthesis. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, between lines 24 and 25, insert the following paragraphs. The employer or principal shall provide a rest period of not less than 10 hours between the end of work on one day and the beginning of work on the next day. This also applies to locked-in shoots. Second paragraph will read, for work beyond 8 hours a day, the worker shall be entitled to overtime pay unless it is already incorporated in the agreement or employment contract, which stipulates a higher compensation. A worker shall also be entitled to night shift differential unless the same is incorporated in the agreement or employment contract, which stipulates a higher compensation. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
On page 4, lines 25 to 27, delete the entire sentence that starts with transportation, expenses, or transport, and replace the same with the following. The employer or principal shall provide transport service to and from out-of-town projects or shall reimburse transportation expenses incurred by the worker unless the same is already incorporated in the agreement or employment contract, which stipulates a higher compensation. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been objection, amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor to the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on page 4, line, Mr. President, page 5, line 3, Oh, sorry, Mr. President.
Page 4,
Page
line
Page
30
4, lines
31.
25 to 27. Mr. President, page 4, line 31, I'm sorry. Page 4, line 31, after the word otherwise, insert the phrase agreed upon by the parties or such that the sentence on lines 30 to 32 will now read as follows. The employer or principal shall not make any deductions from the wages unless otherwise agreed upon by the parties or required or allowed by law. I so move, Mr. President. And I
There
submit
being
to
no-
Accepted, Mr. President.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Accepted, amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 5, line 3, delete the phrase, "The worker shall be covered by," and replace it with the following. All workers shall be covered by and entitled to the benefits provided by. So the first sentence of Section 12 shall now read as follows. Section 12, Social Security and Welfare Benefits. All workers shall be covered by and entitled to the benefits provided by the Social Security System, or SSS, the Home Development Mutual Fund, or the Pag-ibig Fund, and the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, or the PhilHealth. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Mr. President, I yield the floor to the Majority Leader.
Mr. President, on page 5, line 5, after the acronym PhilHealth, in the parentheses, insert a comma and phrase in accordance with law, such that Section 12 will now read as follows. Section 12, Social Security and Welfare Benefits. The worker shall be covered by the Social Security System, SSS, the Home Development Mutual Fund, or the Pag-ibig Fund, and the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, PhilHealth, comma, in accordance with law. I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr.
Accepted, therefore, the amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 5, line 5, add a new sentence to Section 12 that will read as follows. However, employers are not precluded from providing social welfare benefits to the workers. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 5, delete the entire paragraph from line 6 to line 14 and replace the same with the following. Independent contractors shall be solely responsible for their contributions for the aforementioned social security systems. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
On page 5, line 17, after the word meals, replace the word in with. This is an additional amendment by our Senate President Pro Temp, Senator Lauren Legarda. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Mr. President, I yield the floor to the Majority Leader.
Mr. President, on Section 13, page 5, lines 20 to 21, insert the word "and" before the word "person," delete the phrase "and gender considerate," and replace the word with and other, such that the first sentence of Section 13C will now read as follows. Accessible, clean, enclosed, and person with disability, PWD-friendly, toilets, and other sanitary facilities, whether on location or not. I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Accepted by the
Thank you.
sponsor, amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next amendment is an amendment from our good Minority Leader, Senator Pimentel. On page 5, lines 23 to 24, after the term Department of Health, delete the phrase "unless the location is found in areas where no such facilities are available." I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, amendments approved.
Mr. President, if I may, on page 5, line 25, replace the words "gender sensitive" with "separate," and after the word "dressing rooms," insert the phrase "for men and women." I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
They are accepted, therefore, amendments approved.
Mr. President, still on page 5, line 32, before the word "dedicated," insert the following phrase, "safety officers," and after the word "production," insert the phrase "whether on out-of-town location or not." Such as, Mr. President, the Section 13, letter G will now read as follows. safety officers, and dedicated vehicles for emergency purposes in the production, whether on out-of-town location or not. This amendment, Mr. President, incorporates the language proposed by the sponsor. So I submit to the wisdom of the sponsor.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
There being no objection from the sponsor, amendments accepted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. On page 6, lines 17 to 18, insert a new paragraph that will read as follows. The employer shall timely notify the Department of Labor and Employment regional, provincial, or field office with the production location and schedule. In cases of violations of occupational health and safety standards, the employer, contractor, or subcontractor shall be jointly and solidarily liable. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 6, line 18, delete the phrase "in addition" and the comma at the start of the sentence. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Change to uppercase letter T in the article "the." I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
Delete the term occupational before the word safety. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Delete the phrase "and health," parenthesis OSH, after the word safety. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On line 18 of page 6 shall now read as follows. On page 6, lines 20 to 21, after the word workers, delete the phrase, on line 18 of page 6 shall now read as follows. The safety officer of the employer. My next amendment is on page 6, lines 20 to 21. After the word workers, delete the phrase "and shall use the appropriate safety manual for the industry." The third paragraph of section 15, which starts on line 18, shall now read as follows. The safety officer of the employer or principal shall conduct a risk assessment of the workplace or location of production to identify and eliminate or control any potential hazard to the workers. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
Mr. President, the majority leader.
Mr. President, if I may, on page 6, delete lines 22 to 24, and in lieu thereof, insert the following sentence. For this purpose, the DOLE shall, in consultation with workers' organizations and groups, employers or principals, agencies, and field experts, formulate the manual and facilitate its thorough distribution to all relevant stakeholders. I submit, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
There being no objection from the sponsor, amendments approved.
On page 6, delete the paragraphs from line 25 to line 31. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
Mr. President, if I may, on page 7, line 1, insert a new section, section 16, which shall read as follows. Section 16, upskilling and reskilling of workers. The Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, shall, in collaboration with relevant government agencies and various stakeholders, develop and implement a system of continuing skills upgrading, reskilling, and training of workers in the movie and television industry. Thereafter, Mr. President, renumber the succeeding sections accordingly. I submit and I so move, Mr. President.
I bow to the wisdom of the former head of TESTA, Mr. President. Accepted, Mr. President.
There being no objection from the sponsor, amendments accepted and approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, also in page 7, line 7, after the word principal, insert a comma and the phrase "at no cost to the worker," and after which insert another comma such that section 17 will now read as follows. Section 17, insurance. All workers shall be adequately insured by the employer or principal, comma, at no cost to the worker, comma, for work-related accidents or death in every movie and television production. I submit, Mr.
Accepted,
President.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Accepted by the sponsor, amendments approved.
Mr. President, on page 7, line 15, replace the word "any" with "appropriate." I so move, Mr. President. It's
Line
acceptable.
15.
Yeah, it's on section 18, the duties and responsibilities. So it's on page 7, line 15. Replace the word "any" with "appropriate."
All right. Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Accepted by the sponsor, no objection, amendments approved.
Mr. President, on page 7, line 24, after the word "are," insert the phrase "adequately and properly." So move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Accepted by the sponsor, there being no objection,
Thank you,
amendments
Mr.
approved.
President. Still on page 7, line 31, replace the word "should" with "shall" and delete the word "may," Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
There
Thank you,
being no
Mr. President.
objection, amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you.
On page 8, between lines 9 and 10, insert a new section that will read as follows. Section 20, Contractor and Subcontractor. The provisions of DOLE, issuance on contracting and subcontracting arrangement shall apply in the movie and television industry. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 8, line 10, delete the words Section 20, Prohibition on Cabo System, such that the provision will be the second paragraph of the new Section 20 that was earlier approved. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 8, lines 14 to line 16, delete the entire sentence that starts with all labor-related disputes and replace it with the following. Upon the exhaustion of the conciliation and mediation, all unresolved grievances shall be elevated to the appropriate agency having jurisdiction over the issue. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 8, under section 22, on line 19, delete the word created before the phrase a movie and television industry tripartite council. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On line 19, after the word council, delete the phrase to be established by the. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Delete the entire text from lines 20 to 25 and replace them with the following. Comprised of government representatives and representatives from the employers or principals and workers in the movie and television industry. The council shall serve as a continuing forum for tripartite advisement and consultation with industry stakeholders on policies and programs pursuant to the provisions of Republic Act Number 10395, otherwise known as an act strengthening tripartism, amending for the purpose Article 275 of Presidential Decree Number 442, as amended, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next amendment is an amendment from our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Rizal Tiveros, on page 8, between lines 25 and 26. Insert a new section that will read as follows. Section 23, penalties. Any person who violates any section of this act shall be fined as follows. Number 1, up to 100,000 pesos for the first offense. Number 2, up to 200,000 pesos for the second offense. Number 3, up to 500,000 pesos for the third and succeeding offenses. These fines are without prejudice to the imposition of other penalties under other laws. If the violation is committed by a corporation, trust or firm, partnership, association, or any other entity, the fines shall be imposed upon the entity's responsible officers, including but not limited to the executive producer, production manager, and business unit manager. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to amendment, amendments approved.
I yield the floor to the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on page 8, line 28, delete the phrase "under this act." I submit, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Accepted by the
Thank you.
sponsor, amendments approved.
Mr. President, on page 8, lines 30 and 31, delete the entire sentence beginning with the word "contracts," and in lieu thereof, insert the following. Nothing herein shall prevent the worker from agreeing to transfer all intellectual property rights in favor of the employer or principal with regard to the work product arising from their relationship and/or engagement. I submit and so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Accepted by the sponsor, therefore amendments
Mr.
approved.
President, on section 25, again, on page 9, line 13, after the period, insert a new sentence which shall read as follows. Furthermore, nothing in this act shall diminish the benefits under existing laws currently enjoyed by the worker, such that the section will now read as follows. Section 25, effect on existing company policies and contracts or collective bargaining agreements, or CBAs. The minimum benefits provided in this act shall be without prejudice to any existing company policy, contract, or CBA providing better terms and conditions of employment. Furthermore, nothing in this act shall diminish the benefits under existing laws currently enjoyed by the worker. I so move and submit, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Accepted by the sponsor, therefore approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may proceed, on page 9, line 14, replace 90 in words and in figures to 120 in words and in figures. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to amendment, amendment approved.
Mr. President, on page 9, line 15, before the word concerned, insert the words the council, comma, other, such that the section will now read as follows. Section 26, implementing rules and regulations within 90 days, within 90 parentheses, days from the effectivity of this act, the Secretary of the DOLE, in consultation with the council, comma, other concerned agents, government agencies, non-government organizations, and other stakeholders shall promulgate the necessary rules and regulations for the effective implementation of this act. I so move, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I already amended the days to, from 90 to 120 days, Mr. President.
Oh, okay, Mr. President, we submit, Mr. President.
Yes, just the.
Thank
With
you.
that correction,
Yes.
I accept all the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The
Thank
gentleman from Cavite, Senator Tolentino, is
If I may,
recognized.
if I may just interject with the permission of the two gentlemen, is this period of 90 days a period that can be extended, or can we place the word non-extendable period? Because here we go again, Mr. President. I've been asking that we should have an airtight legislation that should not involve the whims and caprices of administrative agencies to modify, extend, mutate, trump legislation enacted by the Senate. Ang nangyayari po, Mr. President, with the permission of the good sponsor, pag binigyan natin na naman sila ng karapatang maggawa ng IRR, iibahin na naman nila o patatagalin nila. So, ang tanong ko lang po, yung bubang 90 days, non-extendable, 120 na. So, 4 na buwan bago sila bumalangkas. Samantalang naghihintay na po yung mga nagtatrabaho sa industriya ng pelikulang Pilipino. Kung hindi po nila gawin yon, Mr. President, in 120 days, meron po ba silang parusa? Itong mga gumagawa. Meron kasi si Senator Lapid na ginawang batas nung araw, 6 na taon walang ginawang IRR. Yung BIR, hindi napatupad, Mr. President. Meron pong ginawang batas nung araw si Senator Lapid. 6 na taon walang ginawang IRR yung BIR. Hindi napatupad yung batas. Siguro po, inabot ng 2 termino bago po nakagawa na. Parang noong nakaraang ilang buwan lang po nakagawa ng IRR para ipatupad. So, is this period a non-extendable period?
Well, I think this is a non-extendable period, Mr. President. And
So-
we will have to consult with the Department of Labor to immediately implement or draft the internal rules and regulations with regard to this bill, Mr. President.
Wala ba ho tayong pwedeng parusahan doon pag hindi nila ginawa yung 120 days? Magagalit sa atin dito si 90 days. Yung legal department o kung ano pa man.
Pa-prioritize natin. Bakit hindi na 90? Is it 90? Mr. President, 1 minute recess.
Session suspended for 1 minute.
Mr. President, I think our colleague, Senator Francis Tolentino, might want to introduce an amendment with regard to this, with regard to Section 26 of this bill, Mr. President.
Please proceed.
Yes, Mr. President, before I introduce the necessary amendment, Mr. President, just want to remind this August chamber that a few weeks ago, we passed into law the Anti-Agricultural Smuggling Act, Mr. President, and the last provision of the said law provided the following as a gist, and I quote, "This act shall be implemented within 15 days upon its publication in the official gazette or in a newspaper of general circulation without the need for implementing rules and regulations," Mr. President. So that was the law passed by this body a few weeks ago. And I'm just trying to reiterate the need for consistency, Mr. President. Bakit pahihirapan natin yung mga manggagawa ng industriya ng pelikulang Pilipino na maghintay ng 120 araw na naipasa na ng Kongreso yung batas, eh hindi pa ginagawa yung IRR. Pwedeng i-delay, pwedeng magtagal. Subalit, Mr. President, kung ang panukala ng good sponsor is to adopt a non-extendable period with great apprehension, Mr. President, with total reservations, Mr. President. Ako po sumasang-ayon, subalit mabigat sa akin dibdib na magkaroon pa ng secondary Senate. Katatapos lang po kanina ng privilege speech ng ating magaling na majority leader kung saan natin itinaas sa mataas na pedestal ang trabaho ng mga senador. Subalit ngayon, pagkatapos maipasa ng Senado ito, meron na naman pangalawang legislative branch, pangatlo, nagagawa ng IRR na patatagalin. Eh baka ho, Mr. President, parang inamyandahan na natin ang saligang batas. We are now amending the Constitution. There are only two branches, the lower house and the upper house. And yet, we will now have a third house, the administrative agency, who will craft and draft the implementing rules. Eh paano kung tagalan nila? Subalit kung yung po ang hinihiling ng ating kaibigan na malapit na magdiwang ng kanyang kaarawan. Bilang isang aginaldo, ako po ay kahit kabigatan ng loob ay sumasang-ayon. idagdag lang po yung salitang quote-unquote non-extendable period para magsilbing signal sa lahat ng mga administrative agencies na wag naman nilang tagalan. Wag nilang gawing pangatlong house yung kanilang trabaho, which is not allowed by the Constitution. We are just delegating you a portion of some of our legal task, but you're not the third house. There are only two houses.
Mr. President, if I may, and with the indulgence of my two colleagues, may I just raise that particular issue being espoused by our dear colleague from the great city of Tagaytay. Mr. President, this might be an invalid delegation, Mr. President, that I wanted to raise. I am not a lawyer, but baka ho maging invalid delegation ang pagbibigay natin ng ganong, what do you call that, latitude, Mr. President. No? So whether it's 90 or 120, may batas po Mr. President. So I just wanted to put that on record, Mr. President. Thank you.
I agree, Mr. President, to the last comment. Tayo po, ilang araw na natin, ilang linggo, ilang buwan na ang pinag-uusapan. Bicameral po tayo, Mr. President. Magiging tricameral na ngayon tayo. 3 houses, Mr. President. Hindi naman kasama sa, wala naman tayong tricameral committee report. Bicameral conference report po, meron tayo, Mr. President. So,
Mr.
I
President.
defer to the good sponsor, Mr. President, para
Yes.
be a birthday
Mr.
celebrant.
President, para naman hindi sumikip ang dibdib ni Senator Tolentino at baka may mangyari pa ho sa kanya at kailangan ho natin siya dito sa Senado. Ako ipapayag na rin po sa non-extendable period of 90 days, Mr. President.
Very good. That's a good compromise.
I want to
So-
put on record, Mr. President, that was my original proposal, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have, with a
Kahit
heavy
po
heart,
na-
Mr. President,
Kahit po nakasimangot po yung mga tiga-dole, papayag na rin ako dahil they have to comply kahit kung ano po nakalagay sa batas, kailangan nun nila i-comply. So, papayag na rin po ako sa non-extendable period of 90
So
days.
may we just find out what's the 90 days na? So sa 90 days na tayo. 90 days non-extendable.
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. President.
Subject to
Thank you, good
style.
sponsor.
Thank you.
Amendments
Thank you,
approved. Subject to style.
Yeah. Meron pa. Mr. President, if I may continue. The next amendment is a reconciled version of the amendments from our minority leader, Senator Pimentel, and from our majority leader, Senator Joel Villanueva. On page 9, between lines 18 to 19, insert a new section that will read as follows. Section 28, supplementary clause. The provisions of Presidential Decree Number 442, as amended, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines, Republic Act Number 11058, or an act strengthening compliance with occupational safety and health standards and providing penalties for violations thereof, and other applicable laws shall have supplementary application to this act. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
Another amendment is from our good minority leader, Senator Coco. On page 9, still between lines 18 and 19, insert a new section that will read as follows. Section 29, construction in favor of labor. All doubts in the implementation and interpretation of the provisions of this act, including its implementing rules and regulations, shall be resolved in favor of labor. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
And please renumber the sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved to renumber.
That's about it, Mr.
Congratulations.
President.
Congratulations.
Mr. President, before I make the necessary motion, Mr. President, may I just like to put on record and acknowledge the presence of our guests from the gallery, headed by, let me point out, Mr. President, the real boss of our distinguished colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla is here, Ma'am Mariel Padilla. We have also with us Ms. Babes Ericta of the Arts and Culture Advocates of the Philippines, Mr. Dennis Padilla my idol, my good friend, Mr. Pen Medina. The great Pen Medina is here, Mr. President. Our good friend, Councilor Jong Hilario is here, Mr. President. Mr. Ronnie Lazaro, Mr. Dindo Arroyo, Mr. Drandreb Beleza, Ms. Rina Reyes, Colonel Jimmy Chu, the Secretary of the Arts Guild, Actors Guild, Mr. Derek Yu, Mr. Jay Manalo, Ms. Dayan Pascual, and our good friend Anjo Iliana is also with us, Mr. President. We'd like to acknowledge them, their presence in this August chamber, Mr. President.
Tsaka yung Kuya Eric ko, palagi ko kasama sa bukid doon yan, sa mga Kaabulan Festival. Oh, magaling na komedyante yan, tsaka performer.
Eric Nicolas and
Yes.
Emilio Garcia is also with us, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Welcome to your Senate, gentlemen
you.
and ladies. Welcome, welcome.
With that, Mr. President, I think all of us are waiting for this motion, and with no other individual amendments, I move to close the period of individual amendments. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
The Deputy Minority Leader is seeking the floor. I move that she be recognized, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Our
Mr.
Deputy
President.
Minority Floor Leader is recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Mr. President, this bill is truly something to celebrate. As we recognize the vital role of the film and television industry, not only in providing entertainment, but creating art that aims to reflect our people's struggles and aspirations, as well as our shared history, traditions, and cultures, we must at the same time promote the welfare of its workers. We are grateful to the good author for accepting our amendment to provide penalties for violations of the law. We hope this will ensure that the rights of the people who prop up this industry are protected. Salamat kaayo, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Risa Ontiveros. Session suspended for 1 minute. Point, I believe we're just checking, your office is checking with Senator Pia if she has an amendment that she's proposing. It's just a quick, no, so we suspend for 1 minute.
Amendments, I now move with the consent of the body to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2505. I so move, Mr. President.
With no objections, Senate Bill number 2505 is approved on second reading. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr.
To the
President.
sponsors, authors, and stakeholders.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2505. So move, Mr. President.
The measure is suspended.
I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended for 1 minute.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we proceed with the privilege speech and recognize Senator Tulfo to deliver his speech.
Yes. Our distinguished colleague from Isabela, Davao, and the Republic of the Philippines, Southern Senator Rafi Tulfo, is recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Kung natatanda niyo po, during the budget hearing last year ng Committee on Finance, akin pong tinanong mga opisyal ng Bureau of Customs tungkol sa dalawang Bugatti Chiron na nag-viral sa social media dahil pag-alagala ito sa mga kalye ng Metro Manila. Ang Bugatti Chiron ay isa sa pinakamahal na sasakyan sa buong mundo na nagkakalaga ng $3 million kada isa. Ulitin ko po, $3 million kada isa. Madami na pong nangyari mula nung araw na yon. Panoorin po natin video. Bugatti Chiron. Yung backup niya, G63 Mercedes Brabus. So, chinek ko po yung presyo ng Bugatti Chiron. That's $3 million ang tag price. Ang tanong, nagbayad ba ng tax itong dalawang Bugatti Chiron na nakita sa kalye?
Tinignan nila yung 2019 onwards, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. Wala pa ho, walang record.
Wala
sila.
talaga. So
Wala pa.
therefore, ibig sabihin, ito po ay nakalusot.
Ayon sa customs, mismo mga may-ari ng sasakyan ang nagsuko ng mga luxury cars.
Isa rin po si Senator Rafi Tulfo na nagbigay sa amin ng tip dyan. Meron na rin po kami mga intelligence information regarding these.
As early as now, medyo kinukongratulate ko po ang Bureau of Customs for recovering one of the two Bugatti Chirons last February 9. Pero, Mr. President, bago nakamtan ang tagumpay na ito, sandamakmak na kapalpakan muna nangyari at nakapasok itong Bugatti Chiron nito nang walang record sa customs at narehistro pa sa LTO. Mr. President, I come before this chamber because of the irregularities that have been flagged to me regarding these Bugattis. Una po, nung ito ay tinanong ko noong Nobyembre kung nagbayad ba ng customs duties ang mga ito, agad akong sinagot ng wala sa records ng Bureau of Customs na ito'y nagbayad ng duties and taxes, itong dalawang Bugatti. They confidently told me that they looked at the records from 2019 onwards at wala daw talaga. Sa nakita niyo po kanina sa video. They said that before the Senate budget deliberations and they would not say that if they had no basis. Ngayon po, bilang pag-follow up ko sa nangyaring ito, dahil nga may nag-surrender na ng isang Bugatti, akin pong background check ang registration ng dalawang Bugatti sa LTO. Ang blue na Bugatti na may plate number na NIM 5448 ay lumilitaw na nakarehistro sa pangalan ng isang foreigner na si Tu Trang Nguyen. At ang pulang Bugatti na may plate number NIM 5450 ay nakarehistro naman kay Meng Junzu. Sa pag-aaral ng mga dokumentong pinasa nila sa LTO upang ito'y marehistro, may kita na itong dalawang sasakyan ay magkasabay na prinoseso. Pareho itong in-import ng Frebel Import and Export Corporation na ang bill of lading ay may petsang December 24, 2022 at ito'y sabay na narehistro sa LTO noong May 30, 2023. Ngayon, ang tanong ko po, paano ito narehistro sa LTO kung hindi ito nagbayad ng customs duties? Ayon sa sinasabi ng mga nakapanayam natin dito noong Nobyembre. Salungat ito sa mga dokumentong sinumiti sa LTO kung saan may kambala certificate of payment ang dalawang Bugatti na ito na in-issue ng Bureau of Customs. Noong December 27, 2022, nagbayad ng mahigit kumulang na 24.7 million ng Frebel Import ng customs duties ayon sa record na naisumiti sa LTO. Ang certificate of payment na ito ay pirmado ng customs collector na si Harold Agama at ng examiner na si Rosario De Leon. Sabi ng mga customs officials dito nung budget hearing, walang binayad. Pero ang sabi ng dokumento na pinasa sa LTO, meron. Saan po nangyaring himala, Mr. President? Noong panahon na ito, 2022, ang Customs Commissioner ay walang iba kundi si Yogi Filemon Ruiz. Marami akong nakukuha ang balita na maluwag ang customs sa mga information or importation ng sasakyan noong mga panahon na yon. Sa madalit salita, maluwag as in, maluwag ang smuggling. At sino naman itong si Yasser Abbas, na Director for Imports and Assessment Services ng Bureau of Customs? Sa kanya dumadaan ang pag-approve ng mga pumapasok ng mga sasakyan. Ano ang nangyari dito? Mr. President, sanga-sangang problema po ang nais ko mabigyan diin ngayong araw. Una po, ang smuggling. Makikita po natin na may nakagawa ng paraan para mag-import ng mga luxury vehicles nang hindi nagbabayad ng karapatang buwis. Ayon sa kaduda-dudang Certificate of Payment na sinabit sa LTO, 24.7 million lang ang binayaran ng kada Bugatti owner. Pero kung i-compute ito, mahigit 207 million kada Bugatti ang estimated duties and taxes na dapat sana nakolekta ng gobyerno. Ibig sabihin, naluging gobyerno ng 183 million pesos kada sasakyan, or a total of 366 million pesos ang nalugi. Ito ay kung tunay ang mga dokumentong sinumitin nila sa LTO. Tinawagan po namin ulit ang Customs tungkol sa Certificate of Payment na ito. Ang sagot po ng Customs kaninang umaga sa amin ay doubtful daw po sila sa legitimacy ng mga dokumento na sinabit sa LTO. Hindi pa po kami kayang idiretso. Pangalawa, Mr. President, may problema po ang LTO sa kanilang registration process. Paano po ito nakalusot? Napakarami na pong pagkakataon na may mga smuggled luxury vehicles na narehistro ang LTO. Siyempre, sasabihin nila, tinignan nila mga pinasang mga papeles at ito'y wala namang kahinahinala sa kanilang nakikita. Ito na nga ang gusto kong matutukan natin dito. Sana maisaayos na ang modernization program ng Customs para madaling mag-coordinate ang iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno tulad ng LTO. Dehado po ang taong bayan dito. We have to implement already the National Single Window Program. Itong Customs, they keep on delaying it sapagkat sila ay kumikita dito. Just this year, we gave them a budget of more than 1 billion pesos for their modernization program. This should be utilized to enhance our ability to collect customs duties efficiently. Napakamakapangyarihan po nitong mga Bugatti owners. May galamay sila sa napakaraming ahensya ng gobyerno. At ayon sa isang article, itong si Trang Tu Nguyen, na isa sa mga may-ari ng Bugatti, ay isang insidente na-involve siya na isang Ferrari F8 pumasok sa EDSA bus lane. Ibig sabihin, marami pong exotic cars itong taong ito. Ano ba ang trabaho o negosyo nito sa Pilipinas? Kung legit na ito ay may trabaho o negosyo, nagbabayad ba ito ng buwis? Malamang sa malamang ay hindi. Dahil kung nakalusot ito sa customs na mahigpit ang pagbabantay nga, kung tutuusin, mas lalo pa sa BIR. Ilan pa kaya ang katulad ni Nguyen na may pribileyo sa customs, BIR, LTO at immigration? Mr. President, according to our Constitution, tayo po inatasang mag-evolve ng progressive system of taxation. Ibig sabihin, mas mataas ang kita, mas malaking binabayaran na buwis. Pero base sa mga napag-alaman natin ngayon, ang progressive po ay hindi taxation, kundi tax evasion. Mr. President, we need funds to run this government and to provide service to the people. Let us develop an effective system that would prevent tax evasion and corruption. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Una sa lahat, gusto ko pong pasalamatin si Senator Raffy Tulfo. Dahil sa iyo na nailabas itong issue na ito. It was during your expose that Meron palang dalawang Bugatti Chiron dito sa Pilipinas. At tama po kayo, napakamahal at napakahirap bilhin itong mga sasakyan ito. I think there's only 60 in the world. And we
Yes,
have
Mr.
two.
President, that has a value of about $3 million each.
Yes, and there's only a few. That's why napakamahal yung resale value ng packet ng packet. So, tama po yan. Talo yung gobyerno dito. At gusto natin malaman, Senator Raffy, with your expose, sino ang nagparehistro nito? Anong LTO office ang nagparehistro nito? Saan pong, unang-una, saan po nakapasok itong mga sasakyan na ito? Which port? Meron bang kasalanan dito yung PPA, Marina, aside from the BOC on this particular issue? So we are one with you. That's why my suggestion to the staff, i-refer na po ito kaagad sa Blue Ribbon Committee para sabihin na natin lahat itong mga agencies kaagad na to, and then tignan natin anong parusa ang maibibigay natin sa mga kasabwat dito sa krimen na to. I'm with you 1,000% on this. And I know that's why Senator Bato is listening intently, because that is also a law enforcement issue. Smuggling is, imagine kung nakaka-smuggle sila na napaganda sa sasakyan. Ano pang na-smuggle kaya nila before that? Could be drugs. Could be drug paraphernalia and equipment. So, I'm with you there. And also want to find out also the background nitong mga may-ari nito. Sino ba ito? Ang yayaman na nila, ang yayabang pa. Puro mga foreign nationals daw eh. So imagine if foreign nationals can trample on our own local laws. Our national sovereignty is being tested here. We have to put a stop on these shenanigans. Parang lumalabas sa mga agencies na ito, pera-pera lang. Di ba? Kung sinong mayaman, maski na foreigner, makakuha na nga ng papeles na makatira dito sa Pilipinas, nagpapasok pa sila ng isang katutak na mga smuggled vehicles na napakamahal at hindi nagbabayad ng tamang buwis. So, congratulations, kudos to you, Senator Tulfo, for that. Kudos to you. So, Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we refer the privilege speech of Senator Raffy Tulfo in all the to the committees on accountability to public officers and investigations and ways and means. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved. And rest assured, I'll also be participating with the gentleman from Davao and Isabela on this issue.
Can I ask a minute suspension,
Yes,
Mr. President?
may we suspend for 1 minute so I may take a break. Thank you. Session. Senator Bong.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body and view of the adopted resolution number 70, which establishes a special committee on the rehabilitation of the Manila Central Post Office, I move to transfer all the primary and secondary referrals of the following resolutions pertaining to the fire incident at the Manila Central Post Office to the special committee on the rehabilitation of the Manila Central Post Office. Number 1, Senate Resolution number 627. Number 2, Senate Resolution number 635. Number 3, Senate Resolution number 636. Number 4, Senate Resolution number 637. And number 5, Senate Resolution number 642. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection to the motion. Motion is approved. Session suspended.
Wala na.
Mr. President, may I just put on record that Senator Bong Revilla will no longer interpellate the distinguished gentleman from Tagaytay City, Senator Francis Tolentino. And so it now leaves us to only one interpellator, no other than our Senate President Pro Temp, Senator Loren Ligarda. And so with that, Mr. President, unless you want to say something. And so, Mr. President, with that,
Yes.
I move that
We no need to suspend. I don't think we opened it. Yeah, we did not consider it today. We haven't considered it yet.
Okay, Mr. President, and that's why you will no longer tackle the Senate Bill number 2492. Thank you, Mr. President.
We can probably take it up tomorrow so
Tomorrow,
that we can
Mr.
close
President.
already the period
Yes.
of interpolation, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, Mr. President,
Yep.
I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, February 13, 2024. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Thursday, February 13, 2024. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. President.